So this time we're looking at a Quickshot II Joystick. Now this is one of the first joysticks I had when I got my Commodore 64, but you can see this one's in pretty rough shape. The cable's split, someone's done a nice custom paint job on it, which I'm guessing they did when they got their one back in the 1980s as well. So the idea is I want to try and restore this to original if I can, and the first thing I need to do is just take it apart and just have a look. And I can see straight away this is in pretty bad shape. The fire buttons are just never going to work because the wires aren't connected. So again, this is all crosshead screws, 4 crosshead screws in the bottom, and there's 3 on the handle. So fairly straightforward to take apart. They are a little bit fiddly putting them back together again, and that's just down to the cable that goes through the shaft for the fire buttons. It's very easy to get that caught when you're trying to put the handles back on again. So if we have a look at the design here, say no micro switches in this one, it's a very simple mechanism. It is just literally a piece of metal in the shape of a star, and the idea is as you push down on that plastic stick, it makes a connection with the middle to whichever output you want to go. Now you can see there, this is the problem you get with Quickshot II joysticks, is after a while you get it where it starts to break and then eventually just breaks off completely. Also the other thing here, these little rubber parts, this originally had 4 rubber feet on it which have long since vanished, and that's just what remains of them. So first thing I want to do here is just remove the PCB, and I want to try and clean up this case as best I can. These connectors just literally slide on the side, and again you can pull them by hand, but it's easy to just use a screwdriver just to get them out of the way. I don't know how many different versions there are, but they all look fairly similar anyway. So I've got this stuff here, this is graffiti remover, and it says it's for plastic. So because it says it's for plastic, this is the first time I'm ever using this product. So you can see I'm really going to town with this. I am spraying it everywhere in the hope it's going to remove this original paint job. So a 1980s joystick definitely deserves a 1980s montage with music.
It's quick for the thrill, within a flick my wrist, I'm soaring over hills in Quickshot II. Feel the power, take control in Quickshot II. Let's roll Quickshot II. Heart and soul, feeling the rush in Quickshot. It's sleek, my hand, how is electric force, commands at my command, writing the tech course in Quickshot II. Feel the power, take control in Quickshot II. Let's roll Quickshot II. Heart and soul, feeling the rush in Quickshot II. In every game, my life, I find only when atoms take flight in Quickshot II. Feel the power, take control in Quickshot II. Let's roll Quickshot II. Heart and soul, feeling the rush in Quickshot II.
So you can see I've just put these in water now, and it's got rid of a lot of the paint. I'm very impressed with it at this point, because it does look a lot cleaner than it did. And I don't know how long that paint's been on there for. I mean, there's still a few little bits, but that's easily resolved. However, this is what I got when I took it out of the water. Yeah, as you can see, it's left this really weird residue all over. It probably looks worse now than it did. If I wanted to make a post-apocalyptic joystick, then this is the way to do it. In hindsight, what I should have done is just use a little cotton wool bud and just cleaned it bit by bit on them particular areas that needed cleaning, rather than just spray the whole thing. At this point, I'm still confident I can just remove the rest of the paint and just try and restore it back to its normal black body again. So I've got this ultimate black plastic restorer, and the idea is to just kind of give this a polish, just see whether this can bring it back to its natural black colour again. I've got the drill out here and I'm just giving it a buff, and to be fair, it's not doing a bad job with it at all. I mean, you can see as it came out, and then the polished one on the right hand side, and it does look a lot better. There's still bits and pieces. However, I got to the point where I'm just like, you know what, I really love GamesMaster. I never had a golden joystick. I think it's time to make this one a gold joystick. So again, using a spray can, probably not the best idea. The trouble with a spray can is, you can see here, I'm spraying it way too close and way too thick. So I'm going to get runs. It just looks horrendous right now. So what I was doing, I was wiping off the paint, and then just trying to apply it a little bit more gentle than I was previously. Just to try and get it to look a little bit more natural and something I'd actually want. I don't want to make this look worse than it did before. The only bit I couldn't get 100% right, and it still had runs in it, was this top section. And so what I've done, I've just used that graffiti remover again. I've decided to just take the paint back as best I can and start again on this section. However, it was a good idea, because what I did learn from this is how to use the spray properly. So I did experiment using vinyl wrap as well, but it didn't look very good.
Well, I mean, no, don't laugh. No, it's wicked. No, it's wicked. No, Mrs. Tell her, Dove. No, it's wicked to mock the afflicted.
So here, this is probably the best way to spray it if you're doing gold paint, because it's quite heavy as well. It's a difficult one to spray. So all I'm doing, I'm just pressing for a quick second and then kind of brushing it over the top of the part I want to paint here. And it's just slowly building it up. Trying not to go too much at once. So now that body's kind of drying away, the next thing is to look at the controls here. So I've got my new style joystick tester, but then I've also got this one. This is a Spectravideo tester that I bought years ago at a car boot fair, and I just wanted to give this a try. So you look, it looks like a Joystick 1 base, and they've adapted it so you can plug your joysticks in and test them. I never saw this in a shop anywhere, so I don't know whether it's something you had to buy if you were a shop owner, or I don't ever remember seeing it for retail for customers, but I could be wrong with that. So again, if we just check the connections here, everything does seem to be working, which is good. Even the fire button there, that's still coming up with something. The auto fire looks a little bit dodgy. I've got to push down on it to get that switch to work. So that's going to need replacing. And really, I'm just going to replace this middle part anyway, because it's always bad. So the first thing I want to do is drill out these rivets that hold that star onto the printed circuit board. And to do this, you go in at a slight angle on the rivet and you just kind of wear away at it until it falls off. And this could take a bit of time. Right now I'm using roughly around a 1mm drill bit because this is quite a small rivet. You might be able to go a bit bigger drill bit size, but again the trouble is you could potentially go through the printed circuit board and damage it further. So that's removed. This is for the rubbish, because just because of that one wing really, there's nothing you can really do with that. So right now I'm going to mark up where this actually falls. Because originally you had that star, it would go a little bit further. Now I'm going to be underneath that shaft. I need to position my switches in a way that they're going to hit when I move it into a particular position. So I bought a lot of different sizes here, but it looks like the 6x6x3.1s seem to sit under there the best. Originally I was going to go for them 12x12x4.3s, but they just hit too much. So the other thing, them little points under there, I'm probably going to have to cut them off as well because they're going to cause a problem. Next thing I want to do is mark up the printed circuit board, because obviously I want each one of them switches to be 90 degrees of each other so that when you're using the joystick it feels correct. When you're pushing up, you're going up. You don't have to kind of push up and to the left a bit or up and to the right a bit. Next thing, just checking these switches out. So these switches tend to work diagonally as well. So you get 4 pins on them, but rather than using the 2 bottom pins and the 2 top pins, you'd use like the bottom left and the top right to make a contact. So what I decided to do is just snip off the other ones because I don't want them shorting out. And I'm just applying a little bit of super glue to the printed circuit board itself just to hold these in place as well. Otherwise I'm just using the solder, and eventually over time they're probably going to move. So just that little bit of super glue is going to hold them in place along with the solder as well. So again, what I'm doing, I'm positioning them at a 45-degree angle so I can line them up properly on that line. And now I just want to solder one side to each one of the pads for the direction. And then just get like a little piece of wire. So this is a piece of offcut from a component that I've soldered and cut the legs off. So I've just kept the legs. So again, it comes in handy for things like this where I just need to make a bridging point. So again, now this is going to be doing something similar to what the star was doing, in that it doesn't make a connection until that button's pressed between the center and whichever direction it needs to go in. And again, that's all of them there in place. So now the next thing I need to do is just cut these little points off the bottom of the joystick shaft itself, because with them on it's just sitting too high, and even though it's hitting them correctly it just doesn't feel right. So I'm just going to snip them off. Place this in there and you can see the way it locates. It's just got that little post sticking out, but also on the top half there's posts sticking down through them slots as well to hold it in position. So you can see the paint job itself came out pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. So what I've done, I've just sprayed it with gold, and then I've just sprayed it over with a clear lacquer afterwards as well, just to keep it and so it doesn't wear away too quickly. Next thing I want to do here is just change the auto fire switch, and I'm just lining it up with the original one just to make sure I've got the correct size here. I'll put in the comments what size this actual switch is, because Again, it was a little bit tricky to get the exact right one for it. I did manage in the end, but again, I bought a few, shall we say, a little bit too big for the job. Probably could have got them to fit with a little bit of grinding and things like that, but it's better to try and go as like for like as best as possible. So now removing this is a little bit of a pain. What I should have done, rather than just rip it out, because you can see I've ripped the tracks out there, is I should have just used some desoldering braid and just try to get rid of as much of the solder off of here as possible. So what I'm doing, I'm just putting them points back in again, and I'm just soldering it on and soldering it up against the side of the case. Because the actual switch body itself is an integral part of the circuit, which I'm going to find out very shortly here. So again, just making sure there's plenty of solder on there to make a connection. And again, with these, it doesn't solder the printed circuit board as such, as the pins come through the bottom and you solder these wires onto it, which then make the connections for the auto fire circuit. Which you can see there just off to the right. It's just a tiny little timer circuit. So next thing I want to do is just try this out, and I'm going to use my new style joystick tester here. That all looks good, but when I try the auto fire, still not working properly. So again, when I've belled this out, I've realised this one here isn't quite making a connection. So I'm just going to solder it a little bit more, and now you can see when I switch the auto fire on, it's working lovely. And again, if I try the fire buttons, that's all good. Next thing I need to look at is the fire buttons themselves. You can see one of them is still making a clicking noise, but one of them is just crushed and it's not doing anything. Again, they only last for so long, these things, before they just fold and give up the ghost. What I want to do is, again, mark off the position where the actual trigger's hitting the board itself, and then I'm going to put a switch under each one here. So for these, I've gone for a slightly smaller switch as well. I've gone for a 6x6 by 2.5. So if I just mark off the center there where I need to put my switch. So these are 6x6 by 2.5, and again, I'm just going to snip off the opposite corners so they don't cause any problems. And again, this is now going to be making the contact between the two parts. A little bit of super glue again just to hold it in position. And again, this is another one. What I did, I used the super glue gel rather than just normal super glue, because that can be a little bit runny. And again, just gives me enough time to get it into position. First thing I need to do is just trim down these triggers as well, because even though these are 2.5mm high, there's still not really enough room for them to operate properly. So again, whereas before it had just a slight bump, now obviously it's got a bigger switch in the way. So again, with that top trigger, I've just snipped it off a little bit. But it's still not quite enough, so this one I'm going to have to cut a little bit more off of it for it to fit properly. And again, I don't want to go too far. If I go too far, then it's just not going to make a connection, and the top 5 button's just not going to work at all. You can see there's quite a bit I've taken off there. Again, if I just locate that pin in there, I can test these out. Yes, that feels a lot better now. I'm getting both triggers working properly. Final thing I need to do is replace this cable. So that cable is working but it's split. So I got these things online, and again, these are for a Sega Mega Drive, but you can see they look pretty comparable to the original. The only trouble with them is you see the leads are quite short on them in comparison to the original. I just want to try it on the bottom of the case just to make sure it does actually go through and sit properly. Yeah, so that restrainer looks fine. That's gonna look a pretty good job externally. What I'm gonna do with these is I've got two options here. I can either solder the wires together, or what I've decided to do is just go for connectors. So that's my rough guide of what colours go to what, because unfortunately the colours on the Mega Drive lead aren't the same as the colours on the original joystick. So I've had to work out which goes where. So what I'm going to do is use a blade and a spade connector here, and these are tiny little ones. And comments below if you know how to do this without having to fold them over first. I'm finding I had to fold them over a little bit with either a pair of pliers, or what I'm using there is just a pair of wire cutters just to fold them initially, and then I can crimp them properly. But if I just try and crimp it without that, it just doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of sits in the middle and doesn't actually crimp it at all. And I've tried it round both ways as well, and both ways it didn't seem to want to crimp it. And the good thing with these as well, they got like a little rubber sleeve as well that goes over the connections. When I've done this, I've got one cable left over, and that's obviously for the auto fire. So the joystick I did it for previously didn't have an auto fire. Quickshot 2 does have an auto fire, so I worked out it was the white cable on the Mega Drive lead goes to the red cable of the Quickshot 2. So with that connected, we can give it a test. Just get it back in the case just to make sure everything sits down okay. Now you can see the first thing you've got to try and do here, there's a slot in that bottom base, and that kind of, it's almost like a paper washer that sits there underneath the joystick to kind of hold that in position. And I just got to feed these wires through the shaft. Again, that's fairly straightforward. But again, you just got to make sure that little paper washer's in position, otherwise you're going to damage the cables every time you try and move your joystick. Next thing I want to do, I got these on Amazon. These are just, I couldn't find any black feet, but I found these clear feet. And again, I'll put a description below which ones I bought. But they seem to do the job fantastically. They hold in there fine. Final thing I need to do, now these are glued into place, is just solder them just to make sure they're making a good connection, and just checking it with my multimeter. So that should all work fine. Just need to solder it onto them cables again. Now you can see I'm using the screwdriver there just to make sure as the back side of that comes through, it doesn't damage them cables, because it's very easy to trap them cables in between. Now I've got it back together again, obviously because it's no longer got that kind of star. I noticed there's a lot of play in this, and to me it's an unacceptable amount of play. It just feels like a really worn out joystick. I mean, it'll work like this, don't get me wrong, but what I decided to do was just get a bit of foam here and put it underneath just to give it a little bit of resistance when you're trying to go up, down, left, right, just to hold it there. So I'm just going to push this through with a screwdriver, and rather than desolder them cables again, I'm just going to put a little slot in the side of it so I can slip it over them cables. I'll just give it a little cut there. And again, depending on what material you use, you may or may not be able to do this. So I tested a little bit of this stuff out, and it seems to work okay with super glue. So I put a little bit of super glue in there to hold it in place. But it is making that shaft a lot firmer now. Final little touch I thought I would do is paint the screw heads gold as well, just to give it that final finish. And again, just testing it out here, everything seems to be working fine. So it looks like we got a good joystick. So again, I'm just comparing this with another one of the Quickshot 2s I've got just for feel. And it feels fairly similar. It does feel good. It gives you that original feeling. And you can see the paint job itself's come out pretty good. I'm quite happy with that paint job. And just that clear lacquer over the top of it means it isn't going to wear out anytime soon as well, which is really good. So now it's time to play some games.
With my Quickshot II, it's all under control. Push buttons and steer a digital world to explore. In games, joystick at my command, guiding through virtual lands. Quickshot in hand, the power I understand. With this joystick too, feel the synthetic groove. My actions are fluid in a pixelated move. In games, joystick at my command, guiding through virtual lands. Quickshot in hand, the power I understand. Sliding through the program, a digital dance. I'll conquer each devil if given the chance. Joystick at my command, guiding through virtual lands. Quickshot in hand, the power I understand.
So that's feeling nice and accurate now. It feels like wherever I'm moving, the joystick's responding perfectly. If I'm making a mistake, it's me making the mistake and not the joystick. So I'm very happy with how this has turned out. And with that, I will see you on the next one.